The silence in the tavern was broken by her wail. It wasn't a bellow. It was the kind of sound that would freeze a man in his tracks. Eyes meeting for a pulse. Clara Hayes collapsed on the twisted wood floor, falling to her knees. Her wrists were securely fastened, streaked with blood and filth. Her trembling body was barely protected by the torn blouse that hung from her shoulders. Each mark on her has a story to tell. She has a cut still leaking near her brow, crusted blood on her shins, and bruises on her thighs as deep as ripe berries. Even though she was 18, her eyes had already survived a lifetime of fear. The spectators gazed like a herd of coyotes. Sweat, whiskey, and avarice were all prevalent. Harlan Blackwood, the Golden Horn Tavern's keeper, grinned broadly as he banged on the bar. "It costs $30 to open." His voice reverberated off the beams. "This one is unaltered, as pure as morning dew." There was a burst of laughter. Coins clattered. Someone shouted 40. One more pushed to 50. Despite Clara's best efforts to protect herself, the rope continued to pierce her skin. Her breath caught, her stomach growled, and it had been 2 days since she last ate. Blackwood moved in a circle behind her, grazing her neck with his fingers. "Don't look so scared, girl," he said. "Tonight, you'll make some powerful appeals to certain people." Again, the crowd roared. This did not seem like harshness to them. It was a performance. Clara bit her lip till her chin began to bleed. She raised her gaze, searching for one kind-hearted person within the sea of faces. Only men who viewed flesh as a prize were present. There was none. Then a new, deep, gritty voice broke through the den. 75. Heads turned towards the entryway as the room fell silent. A towering figure with dust on his boots, weather-beaten complexion, and a firmness that contrasted with the craziness stood there. He was Levi Thornton, a 12-mile-out cattleman who'd been living alone for years after the death of his wife. He had just sold a herd of steers last week, putting more money in his pocket than he had in a long time, enough to repair his spread. Or maybe to pen a wrong that had been bothering him ever since his family was stolen by bandits a long time ago. Blackwood blinked. 75. "Are you an old-timer?" Levi gave one nod. "Actual money." The room erupted once more, half in shock, half laughing. Nobody was better than him. Blackwood smiled broadly as he grabbed the banknotes. "You own her." Levi took a cautious, deliberate step forward. He himself released her restraints. He then threw his duster around her trembling shoulders and shrugged it off without saying anything. For a moment, her gaze locked with his. Something like faith, though as fragile as ice, was present in them that he hadn't seen in years. Dust was blown over the empty lane by the wind outside. Half frightened, half dazed, Clara staggered next to him, thinking this was just another ploy. Perhaps it was, as nothing good ever came free in Dry Gulch, Nebraska. However, why would a lonely old cattleman pay every last penny he had to buy a broken girl he didn't even know? There was silence on the way out of town, too quiet. Along the desolate path, the wind moved the dust. With her arms barely touching Levi's back, Clara sat behind him on the mare. Fearful of what lay at his spread, she avoided looking at him and instead kept her eyes on the cityscape. Levi eased the horse close to a stand of cottonwoods along the cliff after a few miles. Long shadows were cast across the charred grass by their huge trunks. "It's time to relax," he stated. He swiftly descended and opened the canteen. After pausing, Clara continued, her bare feet striking the heated ground. Levi offered the tin cup filled with water. "Simply drink," he said. Her neck was dry, her lips parted. She swallowed, but her gaze remained fixed on his face. Then, without warning, she threw the cup of water at him, causing his shirt to splash. Surprised, Levi took a step back. Clara tripped as she ran and whirled towards the brush. "Hey," called Levi, "just steady, not angry. You won't make it through this fire if you run out there." She shook and spun around. "You believe I'm stupid? I was purchased by you. You think I'm clueless about what's coming up next?" Halfway through, her voice broke. With a sigh, Levi used his sleeve to wipe his face before speaking quietly. "Girl, I don't like those guys in that tavern. You are not required to flee from me." She just looked for a long time. Tears and sweat made their way down her dusty face. Still, Levi gestured towards the canteen. Suit yourself, but you'll need this more than I do. He threw it close to her feet before turning back to face the mare. With her heart racing and the heat weighing down on her like a weight, Clara stood still. She turned after a few steps, picked up the canteen, and followed him back. However, concerns were still racing through her mind as she followed. Didn't folks like him constantly want to be paid? She would be alert and keep an eye out for any first sign of dishonesty. She didn't express gratitude, but it was clear from the way she held the water tightly. The sun had already set below the ridge when they arrived at his spread. The small wood home was silent in the twilight. Kind but firm, Levi assisted her in getting down. "Take a seat. I'll get some water for you." As she watched him walk about the yard like a guy used to silence, she sat on the porch, her body pounding. He came back holding a tin cup and a clean shirt. "Put this on. You appear to have survived the fire." After taking the shirt, she changed behind the shed, checking to make sure he wasn't watching. After what she had been through, trust wasn't easy. Her tone faltered. "I was purchased by you. Do it now." Levi stopped. "No," he muttered. "I didn't purchase you. I purchased your liberty." Her eyes were wide as she gazed at him, uncertain of whom to believe. As the last of the day spread across the prairie, she secretly started to consider the possibility that not all men were created equal. The following morning was calm and pleasant, the kind that tricks you into thinking that everyone is kind. Clara attempted to help Levi mend the corral, but her hand still trembled as she held the hammer. She had eaten her full and slept in a nice bed for the first time in months, yet quiet felt strange, like taking someone else's coat. It was not a perfect match. Levi gave her sporadic glances but spoke little. Although he didn't say much, his voice had weight when he did speak. "You will learn that supper if you persevere." It was the first real smile he had ever seen from Clara. By the afternoon, the ground was covered in a thick layer of heat. The branches swarmed with seekers. Over the parched grass, the air shimmered. Clara collected kindling for the stove as Levi filled the water trough. Peace seldom lasted long in the West, but for a few hours it felt nearly normal. When Garrett Slade returned to town, he was drinking at the tavern, his empty purse hurting more than his pride. The old cattleman who outbid him made the men laugh. His glass slammed to the floor. He growled, "That scoundrel took what's mine." He got up when both of his hired guns nodded. "Take a seat. By sunset, we're going to give him a call." Levi noticed a shift in the breeze, the kind of silence that portends trouble. His mare's ears perked up and twitched. Clara was humming a tune so low it could barely reach the porch as she scrubbed plates inside. Levi went outside, surveying the hills. Against the amber sky, a thin dust plume rose. As cool as ever, he loaded his old gun, Riders. Clara saw a change in his expression and approached the door. "What is it? Will they arrive?" Levi gave a slow nod. "Bar the door and stay inside. Wait till you hear my voice before opening it." Something in his tone stopped her from objecting. The sound of hoof thudding intensified. 3 silhouettes in the last of the light. They had been traced by Garrett Slade. His boots crunched on the uneven ground as he dismounted. He yelled, "Evening, old man. I assumed we had some unresolved business." The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. With her heart pounding, Clara shoved herself against the wall. She had been battered, sold, owned, and saved. Perhaps, however, the real test of her freedom was only beginning. If you have listened this far, please take a sip of your tea or coffee and let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. Make sure to click the subscribe button if you're interested in learning how this standoff concludes so you don't miss it. Because sometimes the hardest part of life in the Wild West was surviving the night. The air prickled your skin because it was so still. Rifle in hand, Levi stood at the corral. Garrett Slade grinned under his hat across the yard, the smile of a man who believed he had already triumphed. 2 riders waited behind him, their eyes alert and hands hovering close to their irons. "Good evening, Garrett," Thornton yelled. "Do you have something that is mine?" Levi spoke in a steady tone. "I don't think that I do." Garrett moved closer while clinking his spurs. "Do you believe that purchasing her at that auction will save your life?" "You are not a savior. "You're nothing more than an elderly idiot with money to burn. Bet in the dirt," he spat. "Before someone is harmed, flip her over." Clara peeked through the curtain inside the cabin. She could hear the pounding of her heart in her ears. Something inside of her refused to crouch any longer, even if she wanted to run. Her entire life she had been running, and she was tired of it. Levi slightly elevated his rifle. "She is not yours. She is also not mine. She is independent. It would be wise to turn around before you make a mistake that cannot be reversed." Garrett's smile disappeared. "I owe the girl. When they called my name, she gave me a stern look." Levi gave a head shake. "She owes you nothing at all." Lightning struck the tension. Too quickly, one of Garrett's men jerked his hand. Levi was dismissed. The news reverberated throughout the hills. Her groove was ploughed over his shoulder by the slug. As he stumbled back, his hat flew off, the sound of his pistol hitting the ground. Garrett's grin turned into rage. Pulling his handgun, he fired. With the bullet splintering wood only inches from his skull, Levi dove under the water trough. Clara retreated behind the doorframe and shouted. Levi said, "Stay down," and reloaded. He fired once again, shredding the fabric and nicking Garrett's sleeve with the second round. The two hired shooters went into a frenzy. After wheeling his horse, one ran away. Eyes wide, the other froze. Garrett swore. "Old man, you just made a mistake. Shooting your way out of this is not an option." Levi remained as solid as a rock. "Maybe not, but I can damn well try." The world held its breath for a moment. Then Clara did something that nobody anticipated. With both hands gripping Levi's gun, she entered the porch. Her objective remained true even when her voice faltered. "Give us space. You got your chance." The eyes of Garrett widened. He wasn't accustomed to being the one who was frightened. He tightened his jaw and took a hesitant step back, hissing, "This ain't over." Then he mounted his horse and rode away, disappearing into the fading light while kicking up dust. Levi was wise enough to relax. The sheriff may stop by shortly to inquire about the shooting. Additionally, Garrett's type never let go of a grudge. The next time, he would probably gather more men. Clara's hands were shaking as she dropped the rifle. Levi was gripping his shoulder as the hired pistol he had fired moaned on the mud. Not dead, but enough bleeding to require a dock. Levi sent him away with a warning after dragging him to his horse. "This ends here, or next time it won't, you should say to your supervisor." Levi gazed at her with a mixture of pride and fear at what had almost happened. "He'll come back, won't he?" she said in a whisper as she looked him in the eye. The sky above the hills was scarlet as Levi looked down the road. "Oh, he will return." When was the true question? After the storm, the night became peaceful. The smell of gunpowder persisted. Clara collected the spent casings close to the porch as Levi fixed the broken fence post. Neither one said anything. There were moments when two souls could only breathe through silence. One by one, the huge and gentle stars came into view. With his arm bandaged where a gunshot had grazed him, Levi sat on the porch steps. Clara offered him a coffee mug while maintaining her wobbly hand. He accepted it and nodded in gratitude. His words were quiet. "You did good out there," he murmured. Her voice was hardly a breath as she looked down. "I was terrified. Only fools ain't." He then continued, "But fear's what tells you you're still kicking," following a lengthy silence. Clara took a seat next to him. Dust and sage were wafted by the night air. She didn't feel small or possessed for the first time. She felt powerful. Across the distance, a coyote yaped. Levi laughed. "Guess word's out. We survived yet another day." Clara gave a quiet but genuine smile. "That first night you could have let me go," she replied, glancing at him. "Why didn't you?" Levi gazed at the horizon, where the hills were kissed by the moon. "Well, perhaps I did spot someone deserving of protecting. Perhaps I simply didn't want to pass away, knowing that I had missed my opportunities to do the right thing." Now the wind was chilly and constant. She leaned out and delicately stroked his palm, and in that little moment they exchanged an unspoken message. Nor sympathy, nor duty, something more subdued, something that could eventually blossom into love. Months turned into weeks, and just as the ground healed, so did they. It wasn't easy. Days when Levi stared at the skyline and thought of his deceased wife, or nights when Clara woke up screaming from nightmares. But gradually, through joint efforts and private conversations under the porch light, they created something strong. Levi regained his ability to chuckle after Clara assisted in restoring the spread. He never referred to her as a burden. He gave her the name Hope, and everything altered as a result. Life out here was hard at times. However, for those who dared to seize them, it occasionally provided second chances. Perhaps that is the lesson that we all overlook far too frequently. That bravery goes beyond simply pulling a trigger. When you keep getting knocked down by the world, it's rising again. It's choosing to be kind when being angry would be easier. Let me ask you a question now. Would you have put everything on the line to protect a stranger if you were Levi? Or in order to protect your own reputation, would you have left? Consider it a spell. Please like this story if it resonated with you in any way. It enables more people to hear tales like this one. And if you enjoy stories about bravery, redemption, and the Wild West, click the subscribe button, settle in, make yourself some coffee, and stay put. Because, stories like this still have value out here in the quiet corners of the planet. Additionally, they can just remind us of who we are supposed to